Hello, everybody. Welcome. I am Blakey Vermeulen, Professor of English and the Senior Associate Dean for the Humanities and Arts, otherwise known as SAD. Welcome to all of you in the room and to all of you who are joining us virtually for our first Public Humanities event of the year, which is a celebration. I am so thrilled of Pitchcraft, the writer's guide to getting agented, published, and paid. Written by none other than our very own Associate Director of Student Programs, Laura Goode. Up until a month ago, yay! Up until a month ago, I served as one of the co-directors of the Public Humanities Initiative. We often call it PubHum for short, and I'm delighted to see how the initiative has grown over the past 5 or so years since we started it. A core tenet of the Public Humanities has been helping faculty and graduate students translate their research into widely accessible forms. My personal view that everyone needs some coaching at every level, and the Public Humanities has become a sort of focus on campus for skill building, finding community of fellows who are learning the craft of public writing. And one of the main drivers of that mission is Laura's pitching and publishing for popular media class, which was one of the first seeds of this initiative and has wildly flourished over the years. It's now being offered for both graduate and undergraduate students, and it has resulted in hundreds of bylines for our students. It's been a massive success. Because this is our first event of the year, I want to take a moment to introduce the rest of the PubHum team. Our new faculty director, art history professor Emanuele Lugli, who has worked as a journalist in his past life and also recently published a children's book, so yay. And PubHum Associate Director Natali Jabbar, who runs and organizes the initiatives from every angle. So she's the person that you will see in your inbox. In a moment, I will hand the mic over to one of this year's Public Knowledge Fellows, Danielle Adair, who will introduce Laura. PubHum is now proud to offer a Public Knowledge Fellowship for 6th or 7th year doctoral candidates who want to create and disseminate humanistic knowledge to a wide public audience. And we're delighted that Danielle is part of the second small but very mighty cohort. I'd also like to thank 3 people who have been particular champions of the Public Humanities. So gifts from Michelle Clayman and an anonymous donor have made it possible to launch our Public Knowledge Fellowship Program. And Ramanan Raghavendran has been steadfast supporter of PubHum since its inception. On behalf of our entire team, I would like to thank them as well as the many other individuals and families who have supported our programs and been our champions on campus and beyond. A quick note about tonight's format. After Danielle's intro, Laura will be in conversation with Stanford communication professor and legend, Fred Turner, esteemed author, PubHum stalwart and champion. They will then take questions from the room and from Zoom. So please use the Q&A function if you're on Zoom to ask questions if you're joining us. We're also going to have little, I think it's note cards that always you can write a question on the note card and then pass it up. Afterwards, we will have books for sale and signing along with light refreshments and heavy cheer outside on the patios. Thanks, and now again, Danielle.
Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us this early in the fall quarter. I am Danielle Adair, a PhD candidate in theater and performance studies at Stanford, and the 2025-26 Public Knowledge Fellow through Stanford's Public Humanities Initiative. It is my great pleasure to introduce this evening Laura Goode and her new book. I love flashing it again, Pitchcraft. But first, I would like to share about when I first met Laura. In 2019, when I arrived at Stanford as a working artist, I was excited about the PhD program, but cautious about how academia might affect my artistic identity and writing voice. Attending the What is a Public Intellectual Today event that October, where Laura Goode interviewed Alexander Chee, alleviated those concerns. I enrolled in her winter pitching and publishing for the popular media course, beginning a multi-year journey of working with Laura. Laura's courses foster a supportive community, and her candid, passionate approach empowers students. She demystifies the pitching process, teaching us how to craft pitches, while deepening our dedication to our craft and academic rigor. The title, Pitchcraft, cleverly encapsulates this dual focus. The performance of confidence, a central concept in Laura's teaching and her book, has been crucial to my own growth. I've applied this in my work on personal essays about performance in the gig economy, both as a subject of study and as a personal practice. As a public knowledge fellow, I'm excited to further this charge. My dissertation, The iPhone Effect, Art and Performance During a Media Revolution, examines how smartphones are transforming the art world. Through PubHum, I'll be sharing aspects of this project to highlight its broader implications, emphasizing the crucial role of art and humanities in shaping technology and policy decisions. Laura's guidance and the Stanford Public Humanities Initiative have helped me evolve from an artist and thinker to a communicator. Pitchcraft offers invaluable wisdom and actionable advice, which I am grateful to experience firsthand. Now, please welcome Associate Director for Student Programs, lecturer in Stanford's Departments of English and of Feminist, Gender, and Sexuality Studies, co-host of the Feminist Present podcast, poet, YA novelist, filmmaker, producer, author of Pitchcraft, and my friend, Laura Goode.
How lucky am I to get to work with people like that? Are you kidding me? Somehow I had a copy of the book that has since disappeared, and Danielle took it. Yes. No, this isn't even the one I had. Blakey, did you take it? All right. I regret to inform you that before we invite the brilliant Fred Turner into this conversation, you are going to have to listen to me read from the book. So I had so much fun picking the selection for this reading tonight, and it tells the story of my journey into Stanford. But before we get there, it starts in a place of devastation and rejection and failure, which is how this book begins, with the two books that I spent 8 years of my life trying to write and sell that never sold. Okay, so here we are. I'm young, I have 2 children. They expect me to feed them multiple times a day. I'm stressed, okay? That's where we are when we start. As I pitched, I gradually developed a pitching procedure for myself. I scoured Twitter for pitch calls and personal connections, and the structure of my emails to editors gained a kind of familiarity. It dawned on me that even though I was, in my own current estimation, a no-talent garbage fire destined for a life of broke, bitter obscurity, I had published 2 books, held full-time reporting jobs, written, produced, funded, and distributed an independent film, worked with 2 literary agents and a film distribution agent, written for a vibrant bouquet of magazines, and taught the craft of writing everywhere, from maximum security prisons to elementary school classrooms. For better or worse, I had amassed journeywoman experience as a writer. I was certain that there were more qualified pitching experts out there, but I just couldn't seem to find them. Then I wondered why, in the 2 years I had spent in a top MFA program with a nearly six-figure price tag, no one had breathed a word about how to pitch a story in a manner that might compel another literary professional to pay me for that skilled labor. In almost every vocation, the tuition of a graduate degree is offset by future earnings. One invests in graduate school with the expectation that it will increase one's future earning potential in the field. So if a graduate student pays in tuition for a writing program more than many Americans earn in a year, it seems reasonable to expect, if retrospectively in my case, that this program might have devoted even 5% of its curriculum to the question of making a living as a writer. My MFA curriculum made no such pretense, let alone promise. I know this because no one offered me a class on how to build an effective author website and online presence, query an agent, cold pitch an editor, negotiate rates, read a contract, or manage any of writing's other business concerns. Yet these mechanisms are also how books are born. Looking back, I see this absence as criminal, a hose job of epic proportions. I was taught to scan, to critique, to revise, to review. Why was I not taught to pitch? It felt so procedural to me. I had this nagging feeling that after making the rounds of multiple genres, I could come up with a template for pitching, well, just about anything. I spent about a month banging everything I knew about the literary industry into a 70-page document. About a month after that, I started teaching a class called How to Pitch Anything, as one of the writing classes offered by the Catapult Publishing Company. I went into the first class the way I go everywhere, overprepared out of fear of being underprepared. I was ready to offer tips. I was ready to serve up tricks. I was ready to make action plans. It took me about 30 minutes of witnessing the sheer vulnerability and terror of the students before me to realize that the tips, tricks, and action plans were necessary, but so was a deep engagement with the psychology of rejection, perfectionism, and fear of failure, all feelings I was intimately familiar with at that moment. And in this way, I realized how to survive rejection had to be a part of any pitching practice. Rejection had, after all, almost killed me. This clarity lingered with me. On the subject of surviving rejection, if nothing else, I was utterly confident about my qualifications. That was something I could teach. It became clear with every class meeting that teaching pitching was synonymous with teaching how to perform confidence. My task was to teach my students how to walk into a room, literal or digital, and convince a stranger that they had an original, actionable idea. I taught them that if they could hatch that idea, make an argument for it, and thoughtfully select a target for that idea's argument, they deserve to be paid for that labor. I taught them that to be treated like a professional, acknowledged, taken seriously, paid, they first needed to regard themselves that way. It was striking, though not at all surprising, to witness how skeptical the marginalized, queer, trans, and non-binary people, differently abled people, people of color, people born outside the United States, white women, were that anyone might treat them like professionals. Confidence became the linchpin of my pitching pedagogy. Shoot your shot and let your curiosity and ambition speak louder than your fear. My theory about confidence, which I tell students over and over again, is that you don't actually have to feel it. All you have to do is project it. What I have internalized for myself through teaching others is the difference between a submission and a pitch. You can see it in the gesticulations of the words themselves. A submission lies prone, while a pitch acts kinetic. A submission says, please pick me, I'll be waiting. A pitch says, catch me or you'll miss the ball. A submission is passive, a pitch active. I am so tired of the artistic narrative of a pretty girl being discovered in a soda shop. A professional is not discovered. She refuses to be ignored, to go unheard. If you cannot have an idea and summarize it effectively to a stranger, if you cannot argue for your own argument, if you cannot locate a story in your own tangled knot of pretty words, if you cannot identify an opportunity and shoot your well-aimed shot at it, then you have no business calling yourself any kind of professional writer. A career doesn't just sit there like a gift to be unwrapped. You have to wind up and throw, drop the ball, pick it up, throw again. Even as my imposter syndrome conspired with my 90s gifted child syndrome to make me feel like both a fraud and a failure as an author, as a teacher, I watched my students take my pitching principles out into the world and find bylines, book deals, and best of all, belief in themselves. My battered ego, as it turns out, was paying dividends in my ability to offer empathetic and informed stories from the trenches. I rooted for my students and came to love them as I ranted to them that a career in the arts and humanities is a war of attrition, and that their job was to figure out a way not to give up for longer than they thought they could. I tried to convince them, paradoxically, while also teaching them how to sell their work, that love of recognition cannot motivate you more than the love of the daily practice of commanding language, because nothing, and especially not external recognition, will ever sustain you more than love of the craft will. When I said this often enough to be forced to listen to myself, it got a little easier to believe it, to keep showing up for my own practice, to find more daily experiences of joy within it. I taught 7 rounds of the class with Catapult, and meanwhile, one of my Catapult students, I can still only tell this story with an incredulous vocal fry, told me that he was a program head at Stanford and that he wanted me to teach a version of my pitching class there. To be honest, when this online student told me he was the director of the program in feminist gender and sexuality studies at Stanford, it's possible that I didn't entirely believe him. Part of me was like, you mean Stanford University in Palo Alto, California? Part of me was like, okay, buddy, sure you are. In all honesty, I half suspected he was generously wording his title with the intention of making a pass at me. Maybe his job sounded like the kind of job that exists only in heaven. Maybe I didn't quite trust that I'd heard him right, or maybe, obviously, what he was proposing sounded so wildly appealing that it became terrifying, so fresh on the heels of lacerating, faith-shaking disappointment. How could I find time to teach at Stanford when I was extremely busy failing at everything? The student kept following up. His name is Adrian. He is witty, brilliant, and kind. My arrogant disbelief that there existed a professional feminist in the San Francisco Bay Area whom I didn't know already was dispelled when I ran into him at a mutual friend's party about 2 weeks later. There I confirmed that not only was Professor Adrian Daub telling the unvarnished truth about his position, but also that he was married and gay. So I found the time. In fall 2017, basically as a guest speaker, I taught a pilot version of the pitching class for humanities PhD candidates and postdoctoral fellows. It went well, and I was hired to teach a full credited quarter of the pitching class in winter 2019. I got all fired up about a related class on the evolution of the feminist first-person essay on the internet. I proposed it to Adrian, and his program agreed to sponsor it in fall 2019. Then, and this is where my vocal fry gets really incredulous, at the end of May 2019, I got a call from one of Stanford's deans of the humanities asking me if I wanted to accept a full year position to teach my 2 classes and what the fuck, serve as the first director of their new humanities public writing project, in which my mandates would be to teach the craft of pitching, to facilitate mentorship and paid writing opportunities for students, and to coordinate an ongoing speaker series of visiting authors at Stanford University. It's actually in Stanford, California. If I'm honest, I still have some trouble telling this part of the story. The failure is still easier to recount than the success. Nonetheless, it happened. I got a job at this extremely famous university without ever really applying. From my own lived experience, I identified a gap in the graduate arts and humanities pedagogy, and Stanford thought that gap was significant enough to create a job for me to fill it. What I wish to convey, however improbable, is this. The story of my greatest professional failure led directly to one of my most transformative professional successes. Many of my life's most abiding and transformative truths have arrived through paradox. And paradoxically, it was only once I had located the inner resource to grieve that publishing failure that I was able to succeed in pitching and publishing new writing and to build the external resources to teach a practice of pitching and publishing. Thank you very much.
Many years before I became a professor, I was a full-time freelance. And so when I here tonight. So Laura.
Hi, Fred.
Hey.
It is. It is. It is.
So just to let you know, we'll do a I don't know, it's like a 25-minute conversation. And you'll have a card. You should have a card in your lap already. Please write questions as they occur to you. Then we'll collect up the cards, and we'll have a chance to ask questions from the audience for the back end of our time together. Okay. So you did, in fact, read the passage that I liked best.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's fun.
We kind of had
Looking
like
back-
bets going here.
Looking back, I see this as criminal, a hose job of epic proportions. So this is super interesting, right? Because in a place of the public humanities, we're learning how to be public intellectuals, how to take our ideas out forward.
Mhm.
And yet we're often taught those skills as sort of as if they were just a matter of bubbling genius. You know, if
Interesting.
you are alone enough with your genius, it will bubble forth and find a place in the world. And you and I both know from hard-won experience, that is not how it works, right? Okay. When did you first discover that? That wasn't the case. Yeah, that not only that you were being hosed at the MFA program, but that you know, that writing as such was a matter of also getting up out of your room, pitching hard. Bowen? Try the thumb button. Let's say it's on. That's a red light. Let me play with it for a minute. I'm a professor of technology, right? Not that that'll help, but nope. New. See, that's it.
That was the upgrade we needed. Thank you, Jen. Okay, how did I realize it? So I got out of the MFA program. I went directly into writing this improbable YA novel. And then after that, I had this sort of like, then what moment? Like and I think a lot of people have this after a first book. You've sort of spent your whole life aspiring to a first book, and then you don't think much about what a whole career is beyond that. And a book is a season. It's not a living, it's not a job. So I got through that first book and it was very exciting and I was thrilled by it. But I kind of got back to my desk and I was like, there needs to be like an ongoing stream of work here. And I had to engage, as I think all of us do in various ways, in a lot of trial and error and sending some real like spaghetti at the wall emails about like, I have an idea for a story. I have no procedure to the way I'm going to write you about that, but hopefully you'll be so enchanted that you'll give me some money for it. That's not quite like the pitching pedagogy I teach now. But I think it was in that era of my mid-20s when I had gotten past the first big achievement that I realized I kind of patted around and I was like, I don't have some of the equipment that I need here.
Yeah. One of the things that astonished me in reading your book was the variety of the things that you've done. So I counted novel, plural, play,
yeah, novels. Yeah,
novels.
We'll start there.
Plays, fiction, nonfiction, poetry, even a movie called Farrah Goes Bang, which I've watched and
which Fred watched.
I want to recommend it. It's available to you on your I got it through Amazon Prime. Yeah, super great. Farrah Goes Bang. You've done a million different things. How is it that you learn to pitch across those things? Do you pitch differently in the different genres, or do you have the same kind of pitch across the board?
That's such a smart, sophisticated question. Do you teach at Stanford or something? I actually think it is the variety and versatility of my experiences that unify the pitch template that sort of crystallizes this book. I think it was only because I had variety in a bunch of different sort of artistic verticals that I was able to look across that landscape and be like, there are some themes here that seems like the way that I'm proposing a project in any forum follows roughly the same structure. So I do think I feel like I suffered a lot in my own opinion of myself because I had moments in that time where I was like, well, if I was just a novelist, I would have published 5 novels, but like, why can't I focus on anything? But since I've been in this job and in the public humanities program, that versatility has been a real asset. So I do think that led to this sort of how to pitch anything framework.
Versatility, and also I very much appreciate your attention to the emotional side of the work that we do.
Yeah.
We're going to talk more about that in a minute. What are the things that make a pitch work across multiple media?
I think that much like, how do I say this? I think in like theater and film metaphors. So I was thinking about casting in a movie, like 90% of the quality of performance that you're going to get in a movie comes out of the casting. 90% of the quality of a pitch that you're going to get comes out of the thoughtfulness of the target you've selected. So I think that the quality of the story idea obviously matters a lot, but I think that what pitches across different genres have in common is the author has done really good research on why they're picking this target and how they are approaching this target. And I'm going to write you an email that's like, dear Fred Turner, I have read 5 of your books. I have now identified from your Twitter feed, like what 5 TV shows we both like. I'm going to speak to you in an insider way because I've already done enough research to know what we have in common. That I think is what translates across genre.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So this is something that I learned early on myself, which is you really have to do your homework before contacting.
Exactly. Yes.
I often tell
And
my
you
people-
always do. You're good at this, I think.
Some would say I do too much of it, because I suffer from some of the same perfectionist tendencies that I know animate you.
Over preparing out of fear of being
Out of fear of
underprepared.
being-
Yes.
Yeah,
Classic
exactly.
theme.
But the other thing alongside homework and really being prepared, and I do always tell my graduate students, read everything before you contact a person in your dissertation or otherwise. So do your homework. But the second thing that you pointed to there, I think, was sharing questions and sharing interests with your audience, and really getting to know an editor, a publisher, someone who has interest. People edit for that reason. How do you find that out? How do you figure out what an editor is interested in? They seem to live in, cubicles on the 37th floor. How do you get in there?
But they don't. They live in like little Zoom boxes on the internet. Like there are no cubicles on the 36th floor left. So that makes people easier to find. I think that we live in a high-speed information age where everybody benefits. Well, doesn't unanimously benefit, but almost everybody is findable. Whether that's a benefit or not, that we can continue to debate. But I just think you don't actually need to spend more than 5 or 10 clicks on most people in our internet age to gain quite a bit of information, which again has some terrifying facets to it. But if you're a well-intentioned person of good faith who just wants to pitch a story about Game of Thrones or whatever, then it's pretty easy to find out who's into that.
Yeah, it's neat too, because one of the things that you're describing is how the people that you reach out to are people who are themselves looking for you.
Yes.
So you wouldn't necessarily feel that way alone in your
Yes. No, totally. What I say to students all the time is like editors at magazines actually need writers more than writers need editors in like a deal flow kind of way. Obviously, writers need editors too, but yes, there's a mutual need.
What does it mean to be findable?
What does it mean to be findable in the existential sense or the logistical sense?
Right here, we're
yes.
going to talk only in the practical sense. Okay.
I think that the bare minimum of being findable is having a website with a brief snapshot of your work and a mode of contacting you. I really think that's all you need. What I tell students is you don't want to have an editor, the situation you don't want is for an editor to want to commission you on a topic that you've maybe already demonstrated some expertise on, and then they Google you and they're like, how on earth do I find this person? So how to be findable is a question that can be answered in many physical and metaphysical ways, but a website is a great place to start.
Well, that's a great place to start. And, it's so interesting. Sometimes people will come up and ask me, well, how do I network, right? And I'm not convinced that networking as such is what's in play here.
No.
It sounds, can you address the distinction between becoming findable and, quote, networking?
That's a really good question. I think that networking is a word that just immediately spikes the heart rate. Like people, as soon as we hear networking, the next thing we assume is we're not doing enough of it, right? Or we're doing it wrong. And what I like to tell students is like, you're doing it right now. Just being in this room with a group of like-minded people, that's networking. So I think this gets back to the whole premise of elite education too, a little bit. People tend to invest quite a bit of money in a Stanford education should they seek one. And I think part of the return on that investment is the network that you derive from such a university. Is that the only way to derive a network? Obviously, of course not. But there's a value to that network, certainly.
Absolutely. It's interesting. One of my teachers, a guy named Phil Agri, wrote a book called Networking, or a paper called Networking on the Net in 2000. And the thing that he said that I thought was most useful was that when you reach out to someone, don't reach out to them because they have power or are important or any of that. Reach out to them because you share a question with them.
Yes, because you're genuinely interested in something about them or what they're doing or how they're working. Yes, I think this gets back to a karmic principle of the economy of favors too. Again, another thing I often tell students is like, there's really no better investment you can make in the early phases of your career than doing a lot of favors for people out of a sincere wish to help. Obviously, don't overextend yourself or sacrifice your own work to do that. But those favors can have very long tails, and like the weird story of how I got to Stanford kind of reveals that too. I developed a relationship with Adrian. We had some things in common. It led to things like, that's what networking is.
Yeah, the other thing that really struck me about your story about Stanford too was that you hung tough on principle. I think that something I've really seen when people do favors, you can feel as a person receiving a favor, and I have received many favors. Oh, yeah. I am in this chair because of many invisible hands.
Same.
When someone does a favor for you, you can feel whether they're doing a favor because they expect something in return.
Absolutely.
Or whether they're trying to serve a principle that you are also trying to serve.
Yes.
And that's been very valuable to me, trying to serve a principle. I see that across the many genres in which you've worked. You're trying to serve the principle. Well, I won't tell you what kind of principle.
No, I love it.
Sorry, yes. Yeah. Let's see.
I track what you're tracking here. One of the biggest principles of this book and this work is community building, and the idea that a rising toad lift all boats. That's not what it is at all. A rising tide indeed lifts all boats. I mean, a question, I'm going to pivot a little bit. A question that I get that I find very hard to answer, that I've already gotten a couple of times on this book tour, is like, okay, Laura, you're talking a lot about like gatekeepers and insider information, and the ways that people doubt themselves and the ways that that self-doubt sometimes arises from marginality. So say that I'm a writer in one of those marginalized categories, how do I avoid being tokenized? Like, how do I escape being pigeonholed? This is an urgent and important question that I'm glad to talk about, but it's also a juicy question that I had to sort of sit back and think about. And I have sort of two responses to that. One is that there's no person in the world who can possibly hope to control everything about how we are perceived by other people. And in fact, we can make ourselves really sick trying to control that perception. The one thing that I think we can all choose and control and determine is our allies. Who is on your team? Not just your boss, not just your closest colleague. Who is the creative colleague that like you will answer a favor for them day or night? You ride for this person. My basic intention of artistic community building is the more people you ride for, the better community you're going to have, and the larger impact that community is going to have in actually changing the demographics of who gets through the gates. So that, I think, is one of the main sort of animating principles of this book.
And there's another piece, I think, of the community building that you didn't name, but that I think is in the book, which is that you need a community to find your own voice.
Yes.
Voices come not again out of this living alone like a genius in a garret.
Totally.
But on the contrary, being in constant conversation.
Yes.
Interlocutors are absolutely the essence of becoming a locutor.
Have you ever like had a really big fear in your head and then you talk to a good friend and it just dissipates in like 15 seconds? Like that's the value of community that you just described. Yes. And I think that you're also pointing to writing is incredibly cranial. It can be very withdrawn. It can be very isolated. I think it's very, very psychologically, emotionally, and professionally important to poke a head above the parapet and check in with people. And I think that's part of what I mean when I say, do you ride for people? You know, like that includes the trading of favors, but it also just includes support, you know, and friendship and conversation. And is it interlocutor or interlocutor? What do you say?
I say interlocutor, but nobody else ever uses the word around me, so I don't know.
This came up while I was recording the audiobook. I think I said interlocutor and then I sounded really pretentious. So we're going with Fred Turner's pronunciation.
Pretentious all day long. Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
please write on your note card if you have a vote for how interlocutor is pronounced.
Yeah. Can you give us 3 or 4 tips on how to build community ethically and with the kind of concern for principle that you write through in the book?
Yeah, I appreciate the ethical framing. One of them is leaving your house and going to events just like this. So again, you all get 10 points of credit just for being here. You're doing it. I think that shout outs are an absolutely free and incredibly impactful way to build community. I can't tell you how many writer friends I've made just because I sent them an email being like, your book was amazing. It really answered a question I had. It really stirred me. It really moved me. I think that gets back to non-transactional, like good faith and favor doing. What else? Building community. I think, how do I say this? I think admitting that you need help. Did you see how I just squirmed in my chair when I said that? It makes me very uncomfortable, the whole idea of needing help. But I think it's a real honor to go to someone and be like, Fred, I'm really struggling with this. This paragraph isn't making sense to me. Does it make sense to you? Or Fred, how was your experience working with this editor? Or Fred, I'm having a terrible day today. Talk me off this ledge. Asking for help. Like most people enjoy being asked for help, even as I'm squirming at the very idea of doing it. I think those are some places to start that are available to anybody.
I want to triple down on your final point. You know, I always feel enormously honored to be asked.
Yes, exactly.
You know, a little confused to be thought to know.
Yes.
But really,
it's a really confusing part about becoming an adult is when people think you know things and have answers to questions. It's very befuddling.
I guess I flew my plane over that island one time, you know, but yeah, and so, but being able to be with a person and witness their work as they become who they are.
Witness is an important word there. Yeah.
Great joys. It absolutely is. So I had one kind of place where I don't know if I disagreed with you in the book.
Controversy.
Yeah, I mean, sort of movie, right? We're about 2/3 of the way in, and we're at that point where it has to turn dark for a
Yes,
minute.
this is the Act 2 pivot.
So we're going
Yes.
to turn dark here for just a
Okay,
second.
we're ready.
I thought you were kind of rough on editors. You said, yeah. I mean, so you described writers, and again, you emphasize, we will talk more about this in a moment. We really emphasize that we work for love, we work for affection, we work for and in service of our deepest and best impulses, and we bear down there, and that's what makes the
Sometimes.
work
Yeah.
good.
Yes, the good part, yes.
Okay. So that made a lot of sense. Editors, on the other hand, to me, tended to look a little bit like they were all business.
Interesting.
And that was a question I had. Knowing editors as I do, I know that they are often out for and hungry for voices, things they haven't heard before.
Yeah.
How do you know? How do you hear both the business side and the voice longing side of an editor when you're scouting them, finding them, working with them?
That's a really interesting question. That's interesting you thought I was hard on them. I think that that's partially because probably the sort of silhouette of the editor hypothetical that I'm presenting in the book is mostly about people who are going to be acquiring your work or not acquiring your work. So they're sort of being framed as a gatekeeper. I think that, as you're pointing to, the wrong editor can be destructive and the right editor can be transformative. So what you're asking is how do you tell the difference, right? I think this goes largely back to my casting metaphor of like all the research that you're going to do on the person, and that should include like a quick survey of what their interests are and how that overlaps with yours. But ideally, this gets back to the networking, that should also include a quick frisk of their reputation, and who have they worked with and how was Fred's experience working with them, and did they turn around the story on time, and did you get paid on time, and did you like the edits? I also think that, getting to the controversy of this, I think that there is and should be a good and productive and constructive tension between author and editor. I think that there's a lot of good stuff in the conflict when there are conflicts. Mm-hmm. I often have, especially graduate students who are sort of publishing early works in their career, come to me really injured about an editor's commentary. And I think that it's something that just takes some time to develop a thick skin around. I think there's always going to be a give and a take in an author-editor, like margin notes conversation, and that both are important, like the mutuality is important, and that we shouldn't be afraid of disagreement in leading to illumination there too.
No, on the contrary, and I will just say that learning to take criticism is one of the most important skills of being a writer.
Huge, and takes practice.
Oh man,
it takes practice.
I'll never. Yeah, okay. I will not tell tales.
Oh no, I want to know.
The first time I turned in a journalistic piece, I handed it to the editor. This is before the internet exists. I handed it to an editor. I was very proud of it. It was an essay, and she started giggling. No. I'm in a newsroom. Giggling. And I said, why are you laughing? Oh, you've brought me a thumbsucker. Well, it turns out I didn't know any of this. I don't know if you've heard this term.
I've never heard that term.
Working term in my world in the 80s. A thumbsucker is a story that doesn't begin with a tale of a person or a vivid storytelling anecdote. It's something that begins with an idea. I led with an idea, which turned out to be a cardinal sin.
That is a bit anti-journalistic, but a thumbsucker? What a horrible name.
Oh,
can you believe that didn't survive from the 80s?
It's stuck with me for 40 years. I will never write a thumbsucker again, except for tenure.
Well, I do think that illustrates a cardinal way not to deliver feedback too. I feel I get real sensitive about this, like not just the word thumbsucker, but laughing at a draft. You would never do that with a student. I would never do that with a student. You would not.
No, I wouldn't.
No, you wouldn't. I know your mentees.
No, I really
No. I think learning how to receive feedback is incredibly important. Learning how to deliver feedback, also very important.
So let's talk about this. I mean, I think one of the things that makes your book really unique among books that might be in the zone is its attention to the emotional side of writing. There's only one other book I know that attends to that in any way. It's called The War of Art, and I love it. But can you talk a little bit about the challenges that you faced that I know I felt were so familiar? I mean, I think. Let me actually say one more thing. I was surprised. I was reading your book. You were talking about the emotional challenges, and then as you were writing, I saw the accomplishments rack up. And it's like, oh wait, you've done that movie, you did that, and novels, and
therapy at the same time as all of those.
Sort of my point, right? So can you talk about the things from imposter syndrome on out, and how you manage them in a very pragmatic way, while making a living as a writer.
I think that's a really important thing to talk about. Thank you for calling attention to it. I am dead serious. I've been in therapy for a long time. My therapist practices dialectical behavioral therapy, which I think is a really interesting companion to academia, because there's this sort of thesis, antithesis, synthesis that keeps happening that I think is very good for sharpening both the brain and the emotional processing system. I think that this is a book about the things that I have struggled with, like jealousy and competition and ego and perfectionism. We're at Stanford. Is anybody feeling me here? You know, like, I think part of the reason why I have felt such deep connection with students since I've been here is because I was them. Like, I also went to this highly selective university where we had all of the smoke blown up our butts about, you know, you're the leaders of the next generation and work harder and never leave the library. And there's going to be a social enforcement of all the other people who are never leaving the library. And I suffered because of that. That was really hard on my mental health. I wanted the achievements. I'm glad that I have them, but nothing is worth like your life and your health and your sleep and your wellness. And I think it took me some time to figure out that my body, for example, was not just like a plant stand for my mind.
Still working on that over here.
Hard. It's hard, right? So I find over and over again that Stanford students do not need encouragement to work harder. I have never met an unmotivated Stanford student who forgot to do something just because they're lazy. That's just not a student that I've met. I have met many Stanford students who are pinning what they feel is their ability to deserve basic needs like sleep or food or social connection around the corner from their next achievement. I will deserve to eat lunch once I have published my 20-page research paper as a New Yorker cover story and made the Forbes 30 under 30 list. Like, that is a attitude I hear much more here. So
it's so interesting. You know, one of the questions I had prepared was, you know, what have you learned in teaching public humanities here at Stanford?
That overachievement is a trauma response.
Oh, that was my next line.
I felt you, baby.
Yeah, this is my favorite line in the book. And I've been at Stanford 20 years, and I'm intimately familiar with this line. Overachievement is a trauma response. I see some nods in the audience.
That's usually how it goes when I say that in my classes. There's like a grave silence in the room, and everybody's sort of like, oh, well, that makes some things make sense. Okay.
But this is where the book, I think, really takes off. The book takes off, in my view, and becomes much more than a helpful how-to, which it also is. When you take the trauma response and say, okay, look, you're still going to live in the world. You're still going to write stuff. You're still going to achieve. But how can you do that in a way that meets your standards, even if they're trauma derived?
Yeah.
And at the same time, lets you live as a human being in a way that feels good. And yeah, so can you just talk us through that balance a little bit? Because I think it's not obvious.
Boy, no, it is not obvious. I'm 41 years old and I'm in the intro level of this. I think that, so going back to the idea that overachievement is a trauma response, I think that overachievement is the trauma response that our culture most loves to reward. And I think that there is a pervasive misconception that people who are racking up achievement after achievement after achievement are doing so from a sense of being fine, healed, and successfully parented. And that's very rarely the case. I think very rarely, just look at like mental health rates in Hollywood, you know, like people are not driven to be hyper ambitious out of a deep feeling of safety, security, and belonging that they didn't have to earn, right? So I think that where this can pivot, like the journey that I have gone on in the book, is I had to really radically redefine my definition of success. And ironically, this was much easier to do once I had a W-2 job with health insurance,
Yeah.
which is a basic facet of safety and security that unfortunately is still a privilege in our country. But in the most woo-woo way, I had to radically redefine my definition of success to creativity as a state of joy, play, and flow. Because what I love being a Stanford professor. I love being a published writer. Those things bring me joy. What I really am is a 5-year-old who wants to play. You know, like I am the little kid who was stapling construction paper to printer paper to make books, like at age 5, really. That state, if like writing is so hard, so competitive, so badly paid, so hard to make a living in. Why the F would we do it if we weren't having a little bit of fun, right? Like if we can't center the joy, play, and flow of artistic production, what is the point? Then we are literally just machines. So once I could relocate my sense of success in my own delight rather than my external achievement, life got pretty different.
Yeah, that's terrific. I know in my own experience, very similar. Mine, delight is still a bit of a stretch for me.
Sure.
Curiosity is not a stretch.
Curiosity, yes, very important.
Not quit. Curiosity that will
Yes,
not quit. And
yes.
it just is what it is. It's like I will
Yeah.
accommodate it.
Yes.
So we're just near the question period now. So if you'll take your cards and fill out
Prepare
any
your
questions that you have,
questions.
and we'll come to. I have one more question, which I will come to. But if you will just begin to write your questions, hand them to Jim in the back, that'd be great. So we've been talking tonight, particularly in your experience at Stanford, of communities that I think have a lot of social access, political access, social capital. If you're a student in your class, you've done a number of things to get there.
Oh my
Some
God,
of
they've
which-
done so many
that,
things.
I know
Yes.
I mean, it's one of the things that's strangest about
Outrageous.
teaching here is that you could never get in. As a
Every day.
student, it's just
Every
like,
day.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. You're never the smartest person in the room. Never.
I don't have a Netflix show. I don't have a gold
exactly,
medal
right.
in the Olympics. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, right. I know. Right. I know. Like my first class here at Stanford, I had 3 Olympians in one row huddled together. It was like, I saw you on TV. All right.
That's
Yeah.
literally happened to me, like looking around. And,
Here.
yeah.
But let's take it from another angle, because one of the things that I like about the book is that it also speaks very directly to people both in fancy places and outside them who don't have access, don't know where to begin, and don't know how to begin. And so how would a person begin to move toward the kind of creative multiplex career that you have at whatever age, from whatever social location? What are some first steps that a person can take?
That's a fantastic question. I definitely think it goes back to building community in all the ways that we already talked about, which can be very low to the ground, just asking for help, reaching out to friends. I feel like my students might laugh at me for this. A real hobby horse I have about getting an online platform off the ground is newsletters. And newsletters are available to anybody. I don't care if it has 3 people on it. Like, you can start a newsletter. You can do it right now from your phone, probably, if you want to. I think that is one of the most organic and impactful ways to start building a community that currently exists. And then I would throw in some market analysis and say that there are very few sectors of publishing and media that are like growing like gangbusters right now. I don't know if you guys have heard, it's been like a pretty hard time for the smart people in the world. Substack is exploding. Like, that is one of the biggest growth engines in social media and media production right now. So I'm not saying you have to do Substack, but I do think that newslettering is a very approachable, it can be anything you want, and it kind of commits you to an accountability structure and an audience. I think that's one way to start. And I think that's also a helpful mode of approaching first publications. That bylines can really have this paradoxical magnetic quality of like, how do I get a byline if I don't have any bylines? You can create your own bylines, with a newsletter website.
Yeah, back in the day when I started out before the internet, you had to literally get somebody to print your work. You had to persuade them to do that before anyone would take you seriously.
That's why they're called clippings, right?
Exactly, yeah. But you no longer have to do that, and you really can just write. And I think sometimes we live in a world where there's so much media, we often think it must be hard to break in there. On the contrary.
Yes.
We're living in something like the 18th century where all kinds of new genres are bubbling up around us. Substack,
I love that attitude. Yes.
And the chance to jump in and play is
Throw
incredible.
some spaghetti at the wall. Just try. It's very low risk. Yes.
One of the things I was taught that was my hose job version of what you were taught was that thou shalt not speak until thou hast
that's a very old guard attitude. Yes.
A long time. And I can't get myself to do a bloggy kind of thing. It's too, I only after I've polished my rock will I take it to the beach.
Of course.
And so one of the opportunities that I think your book points to is the opportunity to get out now before you feel all polished, before you feel all professional.
Go out before you're ready. Do it in medias res. Yes.
Ready.
Yes.
Talk to a few people, not 1,000. Yes. And the next thing you know, there will be 1,000 there.
Yes. It's so well said. Yes. I couldn't agree more with these principles you have crystallized from the book I wrote.
All right, great. Thank you. I think it's time for questions, audience questions.
Yes.
Who's
Who
got
has a
them?
little question?
Yes, we have some great questions. This first one is kind of building off some things you already talked about. This card says, "I'm a beginner and I know nothing!" Exclamation point.
Same.
Yeah, right
So
on.
how does all this work? Are most agent pitches to publishers based on relationships? I guess it's about agents.
Oh,
pitching.
yes.
Is it about people they know? So what would you say?
Are most agent pitches to publishers based on relationships? Yes, I think that's a great question. That's not a very beginner question, whoever you are. I think you might be underestimating yourself a little bit. That I think that is one of the primary values of agents is they bring with them a cachet of relationships with editors to whom they can market your work. So this comes up a lot in the sort of like traditional publishing versus self-publishing question. The self-publishing doesn't usually involve an agent, but I do think that an agent's Rolodex of contacts can be extremely helpful in making that connection that makes you money.
And I would just add that an agent has a reputation of their own,
Absolutely.
and they lend their reputation to you
Absolutely. Yeah.
when they go to market with you in their hand.
And they are paid through commission that they earn from your work. They eat when you eat. So that's part of that staking of credibility.
Oh, great. Next question. What do you think students and faculty in the sciences side of the School of Humanities and Sciences could take away from your book, experiences, and classes?
Well, I love science writing and science journalism. So I hope that a lot of this is very translatable. And the good news for those of you in the sciences is that there's funding in your department. So there are publications that publish, science journalism and science writing. I had a student, Grace Huckins, a couple of years ago, who's written something like 40 articles for Wired. And being as we are in the Bay Area, I think there's a number of those opportunities. So I salute the scientists in their wish to write.
All right, here we go. This question begins, in an era of constantly appearing and disappearing publications, how do you keep track of the universe of potential outlets for you or for your students?
Oh, there's
and which outlets are interested in which types of stories that you have, etc.
I just heard the sound of music in my head of like, how do you keep a wave upon the sand? Like that's what it's like to try to keep track of publications. There's no keeping track. I think there's two facets to this question. One is how do you manage your own published work when all of the links keep dying and going to the big library in the sky? My recommendation to that is save PDFs, and the Wayback Machine is a real godsend for preserving those links. But in terms of keeping track of the current tide, this is why I think community is so important. Most of the places I have published and pitched historically are places that my friend said something nice about, or I saw that my friend did something with. So I think that there's none of us who can hope to keep track of every publication or even every new wave of social media, but continuing to talk to your people and find out what they're doing is the most reliable source of information that I've found.
Thank you. Next question. Do you have any specific guidance on pitching a thesis or dissertation as a book to university press editors? Do the same principles apply? What is same or what's the same or what's different?
That is such a good opportunity to plug a new public humanities program that we have coming up, the Public Knowledge Toolkit series, where we will be discussing exactly this. Literally, we have a whole session planned on this. The short answer is, so the Toolkit series is a lunchtime series of Zoom events that we will be hosting through Public Humanities this year on a variety of sort of like facing the public topics. And specifically, one of the ones that we've been talking to university presses about, perhaps a specific university press located at this university, is the process of turning a dissertation into a book and what to know about that. So please stay tuned to our programming, and we will be addressing this question extensively. But I think a short gloss that I would give on that question is the biggest decision there is, do you want to try to approach agents with it or not? And that if you do approach agents, then they are the ones marketing to a variety of presses, possibly including university presses. If you are not involving an agent, then you are doing that outreach yourself. So this is a large question that I will punt to our toolkit series. Stay tuned for more.
I would like to add one piece there because I'm a professor whose PhD students routinely turn.
Fred is an expert in this, yes.
And I think the thing that Laura said that's so important is turning your dissertation into a book. Your dissertation is not a book. A dissertation has to meet the demands of an audience trying to learn new things about a subject and the work of asserting your place within an existing field. Those things morphed together make for an ugly piece of reading. Mm-hmm. And so they have to be disentangled. Mm-hmm. And that is a process of its own.
I think that's incredibly well said. Yes.
This question is actually could be for either Fred or Laura. Universities at the moment are in the public spotlight in a way that they haven't been in previous years.
Are they? I hadn't heard.
What do you think that putting public knowledge out into the world can do in the present moment to add different layers to our debates.
What do you think, Fred?
I was really in host mode there and hoping.
Yeah, hoping I would start. Yeah, me too.
But I guess I think all knowledge is public by definition. And the challenge is one of dissemination and legitimation. We need to take the ideas and the facts and the ways of testing ideas and facts that we have here in the university, which are very rigorous, very thoughtful, built up after generations of learning and generations of technique and practice. And we need to export those into the world and help people see why they are valuable and how they change their lives. You know, we have vaccines because Jonas Salk did work. We know what we collectively think because survey researchers get out there and survey the field. And we know that their conclusions are valuable because of the math they do behind statistics. We have ways of knowing and things that we know that desperately need to be in the world, and we need to defend those. And one of the few things that I think we don't get taught, is maybe it's a parallel to Pitchcraft, maybe this is part of the skills workshop, is how to defend the work of the intellectual in a world that undervalues it. And we have to do that work. We don't have to just be intellectuals. We have to defend the value of what it is that we do. We have to develop the swagger of football players as we walk down the street. Our ideas make the world you inhabit.
That was so good, Fred. I loved that.
Thank you.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that the stakes of the moment illustrate exactly why it's so important to put knowledge production into the world in the rigorous, fact-based way that Fred just described. One of the undergirding principles of my work is that we like to say that history is determined by the victors, but I also think that history is determined by the published. And that's why I feel so strongly about sort of deconstructing gatekeeping and disseminating insider information widely. There's a reason that tyrants fear the written word. It's really powerful and really important. And history is written by the published.
Great, we have two more questions. This next one is from our online audience. At what point in the drafting process should you start reaching out to agents? Can you reach out at an earlier stage? Likewise, does casting lines too early hurt your chances of being published later?
I love this question, both because it's intelligent and sophisticated in and of itself, and because I could not possibly answer it more directly in the book itself. So the person who asked this question, I hope they read the book. It's very tricky to try to define a universal metric for done. My students are always asking me, how do you know when it's done, right? How do you know when you go out to gatekeepers? The process that I call inviting the capitalists into the room.
That's what I meant about being harsh about that.
That's fair. That's fair. I'll take that. I would say no sooner than 3 drafts, and certainly it can be longer than 3 drafts. I think more people get their hearts broken by putting work out to gatekeepers early than too late. I define draft as a pass through the manuscript or document at which you have fixed everything that you can possibly see is wrong with it. And then the second draft is you send it to another person who points out the 10,000 other things that you didn't possibly see. And then you do that again. That's 3 drafts. That is the earliest point at which I would consider involving gatekeepers.
All right. One final question about finality, actually.
Ooh, existential.
Yes, I frequently find the finality of writing or the finality of thought in writing that conveys knowledge and expertise to be terrifying.
Ooh, very existential.
How does one overcome that fear?
The finality of writing being terrifying. That's beautiful. I hope that person's a poet. I guess I don't know if this is a direct way of answering that question, but that makes me think of how embarrassing it is for me to read my own early work. Do you have this when you look back at something you wrote in your 20s or something and it just makes your skin crawl? No, your stuff was so good. You love it still?
I love myself at all times of my life.
Bless.
It's part of my therapeutic practice. No, of course. I mean, I have worse. It's harder for me in more contemporary stuff.
Interesting.
The more contemporary stuff looks more goofy. I'm a little bit more forgiving
Yeah.
with my 25-year-old self.
Okay, that's
than with my
that's
contemporary self.
generous. I think that the skin crawly feeling of embarrassment is both incredibly uncomfortable and always emblematic of growth, right? Like if we weren't growing and getting better, we wouldn't cringe at those early pages. So that I don't think that there actually is finality in writing because we are always changing. The finality of that snapshot might capture that specific moment, but a different you will return to that. And I will refer the rest of that question to the philosophy department. Thank you so much.
Yay. Thank you, Laura.
Please join us for refreshments if you are able to stick around.
1 second, yeah.
Oh, no, I was just going to say the book is now available for purchase. If you didn't get it on the way in, it is now outside where the reception will be. So please get a book if you haven't already. And one more round of applause to
Thank you all.
Laura. Thank you all for being here.